For 8 long years, Tobias Marsh preferred silence to speech, loneliness to companionship. He hid himself in nothingness, believing it was safer than the whirlwind of human words. But even solitude has its limits. And on this very night, as thunder rumbled like a threat through the valley, Tobias was about to discover that the past never remains buried. It waits, stalks, and sooner or later it knocks. Lightning illuminated the horizon in jagged bursts as Tobias stood at the window of his ranch house, 50 barren miles from the next town. And then, out of the veil of rain, 3 figures appeared, women, walking with resolute determination straight for his porch. He'd seen no other human being in 4 months. Now they walked, dripping wet, faceless specters in the storm. A knot formed in his chest, not of curiosity, but fear. Nobody got lost out here by mistake. The first woman climbed onto his steps. Even with the rain streaked on the glass, Tobias could tell she wasn't afraid. She moved with an air of ownership, like this was where she was going, not where she was hiding. Her knock sounded out, 3 loud knocks that broke the silence Tobias had constructed over 8 years. His hand shook as it went to the door. He assured himself it was because of the cold. But he knew better. Then, her voice, tight, unmistakable. Tobias Marsh. She remembered his name. No one had spoken it out loud in nearly a decade. Not even him. Hearing it now from a stranger's mouth was like waking up in hell. She was beautiful, too beautiful. Wet hair stuck to her cheeks. Her eyes sliced into him with unnerving intensity. A younger woman with guileless features and shrewd eyes stood behind her, and an older woman who eyed him like a cagey predator. "We require shelter," said the first woman. Not a question at all. A formality. The storm overtook us between settlements. His voice came out, parched and rusty. "How did you happen to know my name?" She didn't reply, simply smiled, cold and certain. "May we enter? It's imperative we talk." The younger one shivered theatrically, holding a little bag like it contained her life within. The older woman spoke nothing, simply regarded Tobias as if committing every breath to memory. Thunder boomed once again, nature's merciless drumbeat, and Tobias moved aside. He had no idea why, but he'd spend every second thereafter wondering why he had. As the 3 women entered over his threshold, something flared in the first woman's face. Satisfaction. And not for the warmth of the fire. Inside, they transformed. Worn-out travelers was no longer the image. Instead, 3 collected women slid through his house with unnerving familiarity. His isolation was not being breached, it was being analyzed. "You have a beautiful home," the leader said, removing her shawl. "Very private." She extended her hand. "Cora Lane. And these are my companions, Ruby and Violet." Ruby offered a demure smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The bag never left her grip. Violet gave a silent nod, eyes sweeping the room with cool calculation. "Traveling where?" Tobias asked, unease growing. But Cora was already making herself at home in his kitchen, moving through the room as if she had lived there all her life. "Making a social call?" Ruby said sweetly, dropping into Tobias's recliner as if it were her own. "Folks way out here in the boondocks always have the most amazing tales." Her tone sent a shiver through him more effectively than the rain ever had. Tobias stiffened. "There's been some error. I don't know what you expect to find here." But Violet finally said, and when she did, the room changed. "We found what we came for." Her words hit him like a punch. 8 years is a long time to flee from your responsibilities, Tobias. The name, the date, the memory, it all came crashing down. Cora's words ripped through him like thunder itself. "Merchants Bank of Silver Creek. September 15th. Ring a bell. 8 years, 2 months, and 12 days since. The day the world fell down. The day Tobias disappeared." Ruby leaned her head to the side. "You do remember now. We can see it in your face." He moved toward the door, but Violet shifted, smooth, accustomed, stopping him without threat, only inevitability. "Sit down, Tobias," Cora said, nearly kindly. "We have much to talk about." "The storm's worsening," Ruby said, her voice syrupy. Surely you wouldn't be sending 3 defenseless women out again. But Tobias could see the reality now. They were not defenseless. Not by a long shot. These women hadn't wandered onto his property. They tracked him down. They knew who he was, where he'd been, what he was running from. Tobias slumped in the wooden chair, the storm louder now outside and worse inside. He looked at the 3 ghosts who now stood with flesh and smiles. And then Ruby opened the bag. Inside, a photograph, worn, familiar. His face. Younger, clean-shaven, a banker in a sharp suit. A man who thought he was untouchable. Cora settled back. You did a good job of covering your tracks. New identity, beard, playing the mountain hermit. But faces are not easily forgotten. Violet's voice came through again, piercing everything. 3 families, Tobias. 3 lives destroyed because of you. Memories clawed their way out of the grave. Phony records, purloined money. That night of desperation when he ran instead of accepting justice. It was just money, he began. No, said Cora. It was a life. Mrs. Henderson, she went on, lost her farm. Ended up washing clothes until her hands were raw. The Morrison family, Ruby contributed. 4 children in a canvas tent 2 winters. The youngest took ill. Tobias's throat closed up. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Violet spat. And then Cora uttered the words that set everything off. The 3rd family was ours. The room was silent. This wasn't destiny, Ruby stated, voice shaking now with genuine emotion. It wasn't an accident. This is what justice looks like. 8 years too late. Our father trusted you, she went on. He gave you everything we had. And you stole it. He died of a broken heart 3 months later. Violet stated, words pointed and unrepentant. Couldn't stomach the ignominy of losing his daughter's inheritance to a con artist in a banker's uniform. Outside, the storm appeared to fall silent, as if even nature paused to wait for Tobias's response. But what response could possibly be enough? What words could undo the destruction he'd left behind? He could barely manage to whisper, "What do you want?" Cora's smile reappeared, cold, calculated. "Justice has been a long time coming, Tobias, and now that we've found you." She didn't finish the sentence, but the threat curled in her voice like smoke. Tobias looked at the 3 women before him and finally understood. They hadn't come seeking refuge. They'd come to collect a debt, one that had matured over 8 years of silence and guilt. "You want money?" he asked, desperate to tether this to something he could understand, something solvable. "I've got some saved." Ruby gave a cold laugh, all sugary sweetness abandoned. "Money? You really think that's what this is about?" "Our father did not die for money," Violet said icily. "He died." Cora walked towards the window, gazing into the tempest as if it contained all the recollections she would have liked to erase. "Do you know what it's like," she said softly, "to see a proud man decay from the inside? To watch him gaze at the wall, muttering apologies to specters he couldn't reconcile with." Tobias's throat constricted. "I never intended to hurt anybody. I was just going to do it temporarily until I could." "Until you could what?" Cora snapped, turning to face him, her composure at last broken. "Pay it back? Make it right? You had 8 years, Tobias. 8 years to right, to come back, to demonstrate even an iota of remorse. And instead you played house on this mountain and pretended like none of it ever occurred." The reality hit like a lash. Tobias had considered them frequently, particularly when the night fell and the remorse ripped through the quiet. But considering didn't equal action, and shame had ever been his reason to act on nothing. "What we want," Ruby said quietly, "is for you to know what you stole from us. Not only the money," Violet continued. "You stole our father, our safety, our trustworthiness, ever again." Cora sat once more, her eyes unflinching. "But most of all, you stole our sense of belief that the world could be fair. That good things happen to good people and bad people get theirs. We're here," she said quietly, "to put that balance back." Ruby's smile was back, but in the glare of the fire, it resembled a wolf's grin. Panic threatened to climb up Tobias's chest. "What does it mean?" he demanded. "What are you going to do?" "That's up to you," Cora said. "We've been observing you for weeks," Violet said, lounging as if the conversation was friendly. Your routine, your vulnerabilities." Tobias's insides froze. They had been here, around, observing him as he lived in ignorance. The solitude that had protected him, he realized, made him the ideal target. "You can choose," Violet said. "Stand what you've done like a man, or flee again, as the coward you've always proven to be." Thunder boomed overhead, and Tobias heard his own pulse pounding. "And if I face it?" Ruby cocked her head. "Then you have the opportunity to give up something real, something that costs you the way you cost us." "But if you flee," Cora said, her tone softer now, "we'll see no places safe, no town, no job, no hand willing to assist you. Your face will appear on wanted posters from here to California." The tempest raging outside reflected the turbulence of his own mind. 8 years of concealment were up, whether by choice or not. Tobias shifted his gaze to the fire, its flames snapping like the removal of a fuse. He observed the light play across the 3 women who had once been pure daughters, and now sat as a punisher incarnate. "What type of offering?" he queried, voice devoid. Cora shared a look with her sisters, and then she stated, "This ranch, all of it, your home, your comfort, your sense of security, it all belongs to the families you destroyed. But that is not the actual sacrifice." Ruby spoke up, her voice returned to soft and deadly. "The actual sacrifice comes later." Violet moved in closer, eyes glinting like a predator stalking its prey. "You're going to walk into Silver Creek, Tobias, and you're going to confess every lie, every theft, every life you destroyed." His face went white. That's suicide. "Like you destroyed 3 families?" Cora asked, her voice devoid of pity. "Like you destroyed our father's heart in 2? "And what if I say no?" "Then we tell your story for you," Violet replied calmly. "Only ours won't be so kind." Cora dug into her coat and pulled out papers. "Bank statements, witness accounts, evidence we took 3 years gathering. Enough to ruin your reputation and put you away, if the people don't lynch you first." "If they reach you first," Ruby added, her tone nearly sugar-sweet. Tobias spun around, looking at them in the dim light. 8 years ago, they were mere girls, thrust into womanhood by his treachery. Today, they were avengers, hewn by sorrow, honed by vengeance. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why not turn me in? Why put yourselves through all this?" "Because justice isn't merely about punishment," Cora replied. "It's about truth, about acknowledgement, about you taking responsibility for what you did." "Our father died thinking he was a fool," Violet added, her voice thick with sorrow. "He thought he was the one who failed. You're the only one who can change that now." The wind began to calm outside, but Tobias felt no peace. Inside him, a different storm brewed, one that had waited 8 years to be faced. He had existed like a ghost, living in the crevices of the world. But now, here were these women presenting him with one last, cruel option. Stay a ghost forever, or be a man once more. A man who stands and pays what he owes. "How much time do I have to choose?" he whispered. Cora smiled weakly, and this time it wasn't cruel. "Until dawn." The evening dragged like a knife. The sisters went about with quiet confidence, boiling tea, whispering. Tobias sat alone, tormented. Outside, the rain subsided, but inside him the tempest raged. Ruby dozed in his chair. The innocent Cora said without turning, "Is better than dying with a lie." He watched her profile in the dim glow, so hardened, so changed. But in it, he saw fragments of the girl she must have once been. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. After that day." She spun slowly to him. Her voice was level, but threaded through with bitter wounds. "We survived. Barely. I was 17. Ruby was 14. Violet was 21, with a baby of her own. The term baby hit him like a slug. He hadn't destroyed lives. He'd destroyed generations. A baby? Tobias breathed. My nephew. Violet spoke quietly from the window. He lived 2 years. Then hunger and cold buried him beside our father. Something within Tobias broke. 8 years he'd held to the deception that his offense was purely monetary, mere figures on a balance sheet, nameless accounts juggled in desperation. And now before him was the truth. Real people, real coffins, real pain. A trail of devastation in the aftermath of a single selfish decision. I didn't know, he breathed. You didn't want to know, Ruby whispered, her eyes still shut. It was easier to run. Cora's tone was soft but firm. It took us 3 years just to discover your true name. 2 more years to follow your path west. Another year to verify you were dwelling here, impersonating Thomas Miller. You spent 6 years pursuing me, Tobias said, hardly believing it. We spent 6 years searching for justice. Violet corrected. There's a difference. The burden of their commitment rested on his chest like boulders. While he'd hidden in the mountains, attempting to forget, they'd constructed their whole lives around remembering, around locating him. I do have some money, he blurted. Not enough to replace what was lost. But we don't want your money, Cora interrupted brutally. Money will not restore our father, or my sister's son, or the years we lost to shame and poverty. Then what do you want? Cora's gaze never fell. We want you standing in the middle of Silver Creek, announcing to the town just exactly who you are and what you've done. We want you to pay, like our father should have lived to see you do. Tobias gazed out the window. Dawn's first light crept over the valley, a pale gold rim curling back the storm. Within a few hours, he'd have to choose between 2 kinds of death. The gradual death of silence, or the quick justice that lay in wait in the town below. If I do this, he said slowly, if I confess, what becomes of you? What do you do with the rest of your lives? The sisters looked at each other, and for the first time he saw a moment of doubt. So many years chasing this moment, had they ever thought about what came next? We exist, Ruby whispered. For the first time in 8 years, we exist for something other than ourselves. Outside, the tempest was over, but within Tobias, the judgment was still raging. Dawn spread slowly across the horizon like a judgment. He remained in the silence, looking at the existence he'd built from pilfered tranquility, aware that by evening, it would all be lost. I'll do it, he said at last. The words floated into the still room like a confession long overdue. Cora exhaled slowly, as if she'd been holding her breath for 8 years. All of it, he added. The confession, the town square, everything. He turned to face them, and for the first time since they arrived, the fear began to melt. Not into peace, but into something clearer. A kind of dreadful relief. But I'd like to give you something, he said. Violet arched an eyebrow. You're barely in the position to negotiate. It's not a negotiation. It's a gift. He moved across the room to a drawer and drew out a scuffed leather journal. He held it carefully, as if it were something religious. Every night I wouldn't sleep. Every time I thought about what I did, I wrote it down. 8 years of guilt. 8 years of trying to live with myself. He passed the book to Ruby, who opened it with care. Pages and pages of scribbled handwriting, creased and stained. Confessions, apologies, reminiscences of their father, catalogs of damages, descriptions of sleepless nights, a chronicle of a drowning man's conscience. Why? Cora asked softly now. Because maybe, Tobias said, looking her in the eyes. It'll show I never forgot about him, that I didn't just vanish and wipe everything out. Maybe it won't matter, but maybe it indicates that his death meant something. To someone other than his daughters. The journal went quietly from hand to hand between the sisters, and while no forgiveness was given, something subtle shifted in the room. Perhaps not absolution, but acknowledgement. He hadn't been the sole one who'd suffered, but neither had they. We're leaving for Silver Creek at noon, Cora said at last. Are you certain you're prepared? Tobias gazed around once more, at the life he had constructed out of fear and remorse, at the still walls and vacant comforts. "I've been ready for 8 years," he said. "I just didn't have the courage to say it." As they prepared to leave, Ruby approached him, not with bitterness or victory, but something else. Curiosity. "Do you think something will happen when we arrive?" He smiled wearily. "Honestly, I think they'll probably kill me." He threw a frayed pack over his shoulder. "Nothing but the bare minimum. But at least I'll die as me, not as a lie." And so the 4 of them stepped out into the cool morning light. Tobias did not glance back. The ranch, the isolation, the fake name, he left them all behind like a skin that no longer fit. Tobias Marsh was heading home, to confront his sins, to be held accountable for the lives he'd destroyed, to stand at last in the sunlight as the man he ought to have been from the beginning. And for the first time in 8 years, he thought maybe he'd at last deserve his true name. The tempest had moved on, and the path ahead of him lay straight and unrelenting, like justice.